Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Today we're talking about all things influencer marketing, and we're so glad that you joined us. First, we'll do a quick overview of influencer marketing, explain the benefits and how it works, and most importantly, how to measure it. Please keep in mind that if you have questions, we have some time at the end, and you can always submit your questions along the way in the chat feature. You can also tweet at us using the hashtag VMDinfluencer if that's easier for you. Let's start with introductions. My name is Nikki Hayes. I am the VP of Content and Performance Marketing at Blue Moon Digital, which includes content strategy and development, influencer marketing, affiliate marketing, and marketplaces. With me today is Marlene McDade from G3 Apparel Group. Thanks for joining us today, Marlene. We're happy to have your perspective.
Thank you so much for having me. I have to apologize in advance for my voice. I got so excited when the Blue Moon team asked me to join the call today that I lost my voice. So just let me know if I can repeat anything or if you can't understand what I'm saying. But thank you again for having me. I am the VP of Marketing and Licensing for G3 Apparel Group, and I oversee all marketing, advertising, PR, e-commerce, and licensing for our owned brands, predominantly GH Bass & Company, Andrew Marc, and Karl Lagerfeld Paris. My role is constantly evolving as we add more brands to the family, so probably by the end of the call we'll have another brand to announce.
We hope so. To give you a little bit of background on Blue Moon Digital, we're a digital marketing agency, and retail is our thing. So we serve contemporary designers to major retailers across different marketing channels, including paid search, organic search optimization, programmatic display, email, analytics, and of course, content and influencer marketing. Marlene, why don't you tell us a little bit about G3?
Yep, so G3, we're a $3 billion public company based in New York City. We also have an office in China, but we design, manufacture, and distribute a wide range of products as both a licensee and a licensor. So we started off in the outerwear business with a single leather bomber jacket, and we were fortunate enough to catch lightning in a bottle. Since then, we've expanded our category offerings to include not only outerwear, which is still our bread and butter, but sportswear, dresses, footwear, accessories, etc. We're the largest licensee of Calvin Klein globally, and we also license some blue chip brands like Cole Haan, Levi's, Dockers, Vince Camuto, Tommy Hilfiger, and the list goes on. But we've recently, over the past 3 years, have started building brands ourselves and are getting more comfortable with brand building rather than licensing brands. So today we are licensee and licensor. And we also operate and own around 400 retail locations around the country.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. So let's start today by talking about why we're even discussing influencer marketing, why it's such a hot topic, and we're producing this webinar. Why is it so important for brands today? Well, in short, the majority of time spent online is consuming content. And content crafted by influencers is effective. So similar to time spent researching and interacting on social networks, about 20% of time online is spent consuming content. In fact, you're consuming content right now by viewing this webinar. But search shows intent towards topics or brands or products based on keywords, and social is very interactive in terms of friends and interests. With content marketing, ideas are presented to audiences at the moment they're most open to engage with them, where messages and information are presented in a very seamless and integrated way. It's a cliche, but I like to say it's definitely more than a pull than a push. This seamless and integrated approach translates into a conversation and a dialogue with potential customers along their purchase path. The Content Marketing Institute defines content marketing as a strategic marketing approach that focuses on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience, and ultimately to drive a profitable customer action. So whether your goal is new customer acquisition or customer retention, influencers are experts at creating and distributing valuable content to meet those objectives. In fact, a study conducted by Schlesinger Associates and reported by eMarketer said that 93% of marketers surveyed said that influencer marketing was effective or very effective for brand awareness. In that same study, though, 76% said it was effective or very effective for increasing customer loyalty as well. Do you agree with that study, Marlene?
Absolutely. I obviously agree that it's an effective marketing strategy, and we're continuing to invest in the channel because of the results that we've seen all along the purchase path.
Awesome. And you're not alone, for sure. Not only does influencer marketing meet objectives of the goals and objectives for brands themselves, but it also appeals to how people want to be approached or introduced to a product. The majority want to be informed and not marketed to. Amanda Gutterman, the VP of Growth at Dose, which operates Dose.com and OMG Facts, she recently said it best in an article that I read. She said, Gen Z isn't anti-corporate or anti-brand. They just have an amazing nose for BS. So while a lot of our brands really are still focusing on the millennial, Gen Z is really growing, and that's kind of the next target audience we're going to want to attract. What do you think about the Gen Zers, Marlene?
I wholeheartedly agree with that. While I'm not exactly a Gen Zer, with the increase in mobile devices, social networks, and other platforms, it's forced audiences to filter the massive amount of messages thrown at them every day. And I think that brands are trying too hard to combat this by focusing too much on the medium and not enough on the audience. Most are going about it in the wrong way.
Totally. I totally agree. That's a really great point. Not only are marketers catching on to this trend, but social networks are as well. On June 29th, just a couple months ago, Facebook changed its newsfeed algorithm to favor posts from actual users over brands. And to be fair, we're not seeing as an agency a huge drop in paid social inventory, but this does confirm social networks are reacting to this trend about how audiences want to receive messages. And just this week, in fact, Google revealed that it's testing a Shop the Look feature on mobile devices here in the U.S., displaying content from influencers in search results and further validating the power of influencers. What do you think of this, Marlene?
Sorry about that. I had a coughing fit. I think that this is absolutely where the trend is heading, and everyone should be investigating, in this type of medium, whether it be from a qualitative perspective or a quantitative perspective. One example that I'd like to share in terms of influencer marketing being result-driven, not only qualitative, is a recent collaboration that our GH Bath brand did with Something Maybe. The post was facilitated by the Blue Moon team. And about 30 minutes after the post went live, I received a note from our footwear licensee with a request from Lord & Taylor to add that style in multiple colorways to their buying assortment. So that was essentially the greatest day of my life, because I could finally go to my CEO and say that influencer marketing does produce direct results and is measurable. So obviously the retailer is keenly aware of where, when, and how the customers are getting their information and inspiration.
Yeah, no, thank you for that plug, Marlene. We actually have an example of that Simply Maybe post later on in the presentation.
Great.
So to simply summarize influencer marketing in short, the first and foremost goal is to reach consumers with authentic messages about your brand coming from people they trust. So now that we know what influencer marketing is, we're going to talk a little bit about how to get started. First and foremost, it's very important to define your goals and objectives for an influencer marketing campaign. As Marlene just mentioned, there are a lot of additional intrinsic benefits along the way, but it's really great to start with, we tend to tell clients to define your strategy and your goals based on what you want to measure in the end. So once determined, the strategy will really affect each touch point in the campaign, and We'll talk about each of these steps in more detail, but each is equally important. The topic or event you want covered should also be considered. As we talked about earlier, influencer marketing creates brand awareness. Whether it's awareness of a new collection every season, or you're looking to liquidate products that aren't moving as fast, or even targeting influencers in specific seasons or cities that you want to visit your store or attend a store event. They're all examples of effective influencer marketing strategies. Marlene, do you have any other examples that I missed?
For sure. For our Andrew Marc brand, Andrew Marc is a luxury outerwear brand. We recognized a few years ago a surge in business coming out of South Korea. And after analyzing the data, specifically the purchasing behavior, we realized that many individual shoppers were placing multiple orders. It looked like they were placing these separate orders just to keep their shopping cart under a certain threshold, which we eventually found out was to avoid a duty tax. So these folks were using local shipping agents to get product for less money, saving on the duty tax and getting the product quicker by avoiding the international shipping. So after seeing this demand in the region of South Korea, I began actively targeting them through my affiliate channels, obviously influencer marketing. And then, as a result, throughout the past summer months, which is the off-season for outerwear, if you can imagine, people were frantically buying down coats in 90-degree weather, our sales have been up around 200%. So in the beginning, this was a test, but as we continue to become a trusted brand among this audience in this region of the world, the purchasing cycle has gotten much quicker and much more frequent. When we first noticed the surge from this community, they were looking at 12 page views. Now it's down to 2 or 3. It just proves that as we become more of a trusted brand, that we have to do less heavy lifting on the front end. So just last week, half of our online volume was attributed to our influencer and affiliate network initiatives in South Korea, just that highly targeted pocket. We don't have a sales team on the ground there, so it's worth noting that I don't mind paying a small commission for a conversion, a direct conversion.
That's a great example of the power of influencer marketing in ways, kind of unconventional ways that we might not typically think of. Thank you for that. So let's move on to the second step in the process of influencer marketing, which is influencer identification. And this is super important. You just kind of touched on it a little bit, Marlene, when you said you're looking for those different pockets, specifically with the South Korea audience. But one of the biggest blunders that we see brands make is thinking that they need to find the biggest audience to fit their budget, rather than finding the right audience for their brand. And who has the biggest audiences but celebrities? But celebrities always don't make the best influencers. Here are some examples of paid celebrity posts that went wrong. In each of these examples, the celebrity posted for the brand but also included the brand or agency's instructions that were sent to them, which is a total fail, in my opinion. After the brands themselves, celebrities are becoming, less of a trusted source for information than they used to be. Brands also need to go beyond their target audience and work with influencers that align with the message that they want conveyed. So the example on the left there is he is a well-known reality TV personality. He's known for excessive partying and citizen rehab and things like that. But I wouldn't consider him like a health or a fitness guru that would naturally post about a protein shake. So instead, brands should consider working with what are known as micro-influencers. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. So this notion of micro-influencers, they might have a smaller following than other social megastars or influencer giants, but those with fewer followers are really often are seen as more trustworthy and authentic. Their opinions do carry weight, and their audiences are more loyal and more engaged. So a recent study reported in Digiday states that Instagram followers with under 1,000 followers have a like rate of about 8%. And those with 1,000 to 10,000 have a rate of about 4%. So as the follower rate grows, that engagement drops even further. In summary, basically biggest is not always the best. So at Blue Moon, we do consider our clients' budgets, and while an influencer's following is also a consideration, we really put together plans to identify influencers that meet the goals and objectives of the campaign ultimately, because that's how we're going to be measured. So it usually ends up being kind of a mix of larger, medium, and smaller influencers. And while size might not matter as much in terms of audience, knowing where your audience spends their time should also be considered when selecting influencers. Many influencers specialize in one or two social networks. Sometimes we work with influencer networks which can help identify and even filter influencers based on audience data. And social listening tools are also super helpful with identifying influencers that have like an affinity to your brand. And while all this data available at our fingertips may make us feel a little disconnected to the influencers themselves, it's really important to remember that we're talking about people at the end of the day. I've actually heard influencers referred to as media outlets that, which kind of stings a little bit if you ask them themselves. But I wanted to share some other tips and tricks when working with influencers, remembering that they are people. So one of the benefits of working with an agency is that we can align strategies with other marketing channels. For example, we ask influencers to use search terms that we're trying to rank organically for in the search engines. But we found that the more restrictions and requirements that you give an influencer, the message itself really becomes less authentic and really results in lower engagement overall. Secondly, despite some influencers operating in an affiliate capacity, it's important to remember that influencers are creating and distributing content and should be compensated appropriately. The most sophisticated influencers know that if they meet the goals of the brand, they'll get repeat business. Plus, if they are part of any influencer networks, they understand that they're being rated or scored, so they are really incented to do the best job possible. Depending on the influencer, they may not be as familiar with the FTC guidelines, so the brand or their agency is really responsible for enforcing that to make sure that their content is compliant. And although you need to enforce these guidelines and understand the metrics behind influencer marketing, it's important to treat influencers like a partner and not just another media vendor. Remember, we really do need these influencers more than they need us. As we mentioned earlier, more and more brands are investing in influencer marketing. So they're really finding ways to work with these other brands. So you really don't want to isolate yourself in that way or identify yourself in that way. And then they know what will resonate best with their audience too. Which brings me to my last tip. This goes back to my comment about influencer restrictions when creating influencer campaigns. Influencer marketing is really effective because it's not really coming from the brand, but from people others trust. And to be the most successful, it needs to be in the influencer's voice and not the brand's voice. Marlene, do you have any other additional do's and don'ts or tips and tricks with working with influencers?
I think, all the points that you made are definitely valid and important to consider when pinpointing the right influencers for your brand. I do treat them as partners, and I'm not forcing anything upon them except for maybe 2 or 3 hashtags and some FTC guidelines once the copy comes back. But we give them free reign to choose whatever product they want, style it however they want. At the end of the day, that's the only way to be authentic. We don't want to put guardrails on the user-generated content, and obviously a customer can spot that. They're not stupid, and people know when it's an obvious paid post versus something that could be organic and authentic. So I would say, another thing to consider would be the other brands that the influencer has featured in the past and has worked with, and also their location as well. One of the benefits of wearing so many hats here is that I also oversee PR, so it's a lot easier for me to then take that content and distribute it in a way that works for us both from a communication standpoint and an affiliate social media perspective as well. So I think you just need to treat them like another relationship, whether it be with a vendor, a customer, you know, a PR ally or whatnot. It's just you have to consider that they are people. It's not just a business model for them, and let them just drive the ship in terms of their taste and styling, obviously within reason. But I think it's important to kind of give up control in the beginning parts of that.
Yeah, we definitely, that's a great point, Marlene, and we definitely learn as we go along the way too. So as we run different influencer campaigns and see what works or what doesn't, you know, still making those kind of general guidelines or, hey, this works for this person, put it in your own kind of perspective or your own words, I think definitely helps. Okay, so moving right along, the next step in an influencer marketing campaign is my favorite and what I consider the most fun part of influencer marketing, but it's content development. So while influencer marketing is obviously paid content, there's still some journalistic integrity that goes into it. Influencers are not going to represent a brand, that they don't feel comfortable representing to their audience. Influencers have really garnered their audience because they are genuine in what they post. And last month I was talking to an influencer who said, you know, of the content that she posts online, about 38% of it is paid, and that's kind of like her sweet spot. And that sweet spot's going to be different for every influencer, but whether it's a long-form content post or on a blog or a social post on Facebook or Instagram, most influencers will allow you to review a draft before posting, but really, as we just mentioned, and to go along with Marlene's comment, it's really purely for accuracy and nothing more. We really don't want to change their authentic message. So, and Marlene mentioned earlier the Simply Maybe post that we had done for J.H. Bass, and it's represented there on the right-hand side of the screen. So once that content is created, influencers will distribute to their audience via different networks if you've agreed to that in the beginning of your engagement. More and more, we're seeing brands repurpose the content and distribute to their own audiences, which provides some credibility to the brand. In a couple of rare cases even, we've had brands split the cost with influencers to promote content that they've created. So for example, with boosted posts on Facebook or sponsored ads on Instagram. And it does increase the exposure for the influencers themselves, but the brands also benefit by having that message amplified. So finally, how are we going to measure the success of these influencer campaigns? So one of the reasons more and more marketers are embracing influencer marketing, I feel, is that it's measurable. Depending on the goal of the campaign, whether it's brand awareness or sales, we can now measure the performance of your influencers or your campaigns on an influencer by influencer or action by action and channel by channel basis. So one metric that might be new to our webinar audience today is this concept of earned media value. So earned media value, or EMV for short, refers to the dollar value attributed to like social sharing and other unpaid digital media. It's the measurement of an advertising campaign success beyond paid placements in a way to measure the value or the true value of influencer marketing. According to Rhythm One 2015 benchmarks report, most retail and apparel brands see an average of $6.66 earned media value for every dollar that they spend. Some of the measurable actions that contribute to this earned media value include things like likes and shares and comments, depending on the platform. Other things to measure include things like content entries if you're doing a giveaway with a brand or things of that nature. And as an agency, of course, we're no stranger to reporting results to our clients. So just a little bit of a plug for Blue Moon and why we really do feel like there are additional benefits to working with an agency. You know, using us to manage your campaigns includes tapping into our expertise and relationships with influencers from the get-go, so it shortens the time it takes to identify and lock in these influencers. We manage all the steps in the process we've talked about today, saving you a lot of time and creating those efficiencies. But in most cases, we can stretch your budget as well. Because we already work with influencers directly or through influencer talent agencies or influencer networks even, there's typically a cost associated with doing that. So in a lot of cases, we've already paid that kind of entry fee for those things. And we also share benchmarks into performance for similar brands or platforms. So we know if influencer A has worked with, one brand versus another and how they typically perform or where their strengths are. And then finally, we're aligned with other digital marketing channels, like I mentioned earlier, such as organic search, and then display and other channels too. Marlene, did I forget any benefits with working with agencies?
Yes, a lot. Pre-Blue Moon, I was just inundated with a lot of back and forth that typically comes with working directly with the influencers. So for me, agencies like Blue Moon create a lot of efficiencies. Because I've got so much on my plate, it's a much more streamlined process, and I'm able to stay on top of everything a lot better than not working with an agency. So it definitely does create efficiencies and is much more convenient.
Thanks.
And targeted.
Thank you for that plug. So speaking of aligning influencer marketing with other marketing channels, I love sharing the Venn diagram with our clients to put influencer marketing into context of a larger content marketing strategy. The middle area there where the three areas intersect is what I like to say is where the magic happens, so to speak. Because influencers are creating and distributing the content, it fits between kind of the earned and paid channels, like you were saying earlier, Marlene, with the PR, but the paid aspect as well. And a lot of clients approach content marketing purely for the organic ranking benefits in search engines, which is okay, but I would argue that it's much more valuable than just that. And unless a search was performed on that specific search engine, no one will see that great content that you created. And paid content works the same way. Your potential customers might not be ready for your message when it's displayed to them in that respect. So a bigger content marketing strategy that incorporates all three areas really does have the most success. And with that, I want to open it up for questions that we've had along the way. It looks like we have 2 right now. So let me just read those. The first is, what kind of budgets are needed? Well, I would say that it really depends. I mean, I don't mean to be vague, but it depends on your goals. It depends on your expectations of reach. And it goes without saying that obviously the bigger the budget, the bigger the reach. So what we would do is sit down with you and talk really about what the goals of the campaign are, and then talk about what budgets would need to be supported to facilitate that. So I hope that answers that question. The second one is, how long does an influencer campaign last? Well, I get this question a lot, and that's really the beauty of influencer marketing. The content lives on indefinitely. And as we've hopefully outlined today, that the benefits really do outlast that initial campaign. There really isn't a set time frame. It's not like other paid channels where you're going from month to month, you have your monthly budgets, and you're executing on a set number of campaigns. Influencer marketing is a little bit different based on the goals again. I always go back to the goals. We've worked with brands on collection launches that need to obviously happen at a certain time frame, and we work with influencers on those dates, but it's not kind of the content's up for a month and then it comes down. It really does live on forever. So, and it doesn't look like we have any other questions. Marlene, do you have any kind of final thoughts?
I would just say in terms of budget allocations, and again, not to be vague, but for us, with all of our brands, we look at the total digital marketing budget and are spending about a quarter to a third of that on influencer marketing. So it is a big piece for us, and it does work, and it has been producing results. So with that said, I'm able to get more funding for these programs. And it's come a long way. I mean, we've been doing this for, I've been here 5 years. We haven't had all of the brands that we have today, but it really has come a long way, and we're seeing a lot more support coming out of our chairman and CEO, because we're finally starting to be able to prove that this does work. And with the help of Blue Moon and some of the analytic metrics and the programs that we can now tap into, it's much easier to justify when I go in for budget approval.
No, that's a great point, and a great way to kind of summarize the benefits. Obviously, as the marketers see results, they keep funding it more and more, especially since it's measurable now too. I think it's much more tangible for marketers to understand. So it definitely has come a long way. And with that, it looks like we don't have any further questions. So this concludes our webinar for today. We will be sending you the recording, so be sure to look for that in your email. And thanks again for joining us today.